The noughties is one of my favorite eras of comics and cartoons. It was around then that society started to fully embrace technology and alternative lifestyles, and you saw that sort of free-flowing narrative infiltrate media. Shows like South Park and Family Guy entered their stride around this time. Adult cartoons such as Moro Oro, Clone High, Mission Hill, Quads aimed to tell stories about topics that audiences were familiar with, but do so with a tongue-in-cheek attitude. These over-the-top cartoons would produce some of the most enduring television characters of the modern era. Sometimes, though, these shows teetered on a much darker side. Bitter Virgin is a story with a lot of layers, and the true meaning of what the author is trying to convey stays revealed for a good portion of the story. We open with Daisuke Suwa, a country boy who looks forward to finally going to the big city like his older sister and leaving behind his small village. He's a real playboy, and all he really cares about is hooking up with girls. He notices Hinako Aikawa, a very quiet girl in his class, who seems to be somewhat nervous around men. This intrigue leads Daisuke to inadvertently hearing Hinako's deepest, darkest secret. The reason why Hinako is nervous around men is because her stepfather abused her. And this wasn't just your typical seinen abuse, it goes a lot deeper. She's been impregnated multiple times by her stepfather. Her mother disregards the abuse that her daughter was going through. She's had her school life interrupted. She's unable to make any real lasting relationship towards men. She also has a longing to finally grasp and hold the child that she had to give up for adoption. Hinako truly is a bitter virgin.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
This is an interesting story because you assume it's going to be very shoujo-esque, and it initially leads off as being a typical shoujo series, but when we get the heavy topics introduced quickly, you realize that Ki Kusunoki, the mangaka of this series, is writing from personal experience and wants to get this story across by any means necessary. As the story progresses, we get hints to some of the mental and emotional instabilities of the other characters. Kazuki Ibushi is a classmate of Daisuke's and Hinako's. She's also madly in love with Daisuke, or obsessed. It really can go either way. She keeps forcing herself onto Daisuke and tries to push away anyone who gets in between their budding relationship. Yuzu Yamamoto is another one of Daisuke's classmates and childhood friend who also works with him part-time. She's observing these budding romances going on, and she isn't a fan. So you start to see a sort of love triangle start to develop between these characters. And while there is an abundance of melodrama, you can't help but love this story and see how Hinako does everything in her power to try and get to learn about Daisuke and get closer to him. Meanwhile, Daisuke does the gentleman thing and tries his best to make sure that Hinako isn't wounded or reminded of all of the issues she had with her previous pregnancies. I really like Bitter Virgin. I first started reading it back when I was in high school as it was first running, and I remember it getting a little bit of traction, but not that much attention. However, the story really resonated with me because I was the same age as these characters at the time, and I couldn't imagine having a friend go through such horrible experiences like what these characters were. All that being said, I was super engaged and interested in this story. Teenage pregnancy stories were kind of popular during that time, but it's something that you didn't really see explored within Japanese culture and media, so it's always interesting to get any sort of story like this, and Bitter Virgin is one of those that I truly think doesn't feel dated. The pacing for this story is a little interesting. It's quickly paced, but this is a get 'em in, get 'em out sort of story. There's only 4 volumes, and it was only published for a few years, so you don't really mind that we don't get a huge supporting cast. Also, with the introduction of Izumi Suwa, Daisuke's older sister, that is a shocker. I have to admit, this story isn't groundbreaking, but it is intriguing. However, the introduction of Daisuke's sister really brings things up another notch or two. I absolutely love seeing people who choose alternative lifestyles to what is considered the norm. And one of the biggest hurdles a woman can take on is deciding to raise a child on her own. And that really is something that you don't see explored a lot in Japanese media, especially when the characters are based in a rural village. Seeing Izumi interact with Daisuke, Hinako, and her overbearing mother makes for such a interesting twist. There's only so much that we can develop with Hinako. She doesn't have that much of a personality, and that's done by design. She really is a character who is all about her trauma and her past experiences. Seeing Izumi, we see a character who's ready to take control of her own destiny, and she doesn't need to follow any sort of obscure rules or traditional standards in order to live that life. But then, Kusunoki drops another plot twist and bombshell on us. All of the sudden, you really appreciate Izumi, a character who wasn't in the story for very long, but one who is so human that even with her limited screen time, you're able to relate to her struggles and you wish for good things to happen to her. The art of Bitter Virgin is pretty dated. It's nothing special to look at. I don't think Kusunoki is a fantastic artist, but they understand how to tell a trashy story. And for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience writing love stories, you really do feel the real life experiences seeped into Bitter Virgin. Key talks about dealing with her miscarriage, but going back to work and keeping that trauma within herself. Not even her assistants or editors knew what she was going through, and it's something that she wanted to put in her work, make it more cathartic, and become a sort of healing process for her. The concept of angel mothers is so sad, and as I get older myself, I now understand the magnitude of what a miscarriage is. I really enjoy Bitter Virgin. It's a story that has been swept away with time, but one that I think would do really well with a modern day adaptation. There are definitely parts that should have been elaborated on, but really the story is about how females deal with trauma and what it means to throw away the expectations of becoming a parent. If you like stories that deviate from traditional romantic plots, stories that deal with heavy topics but show the MC coming through and getting stronger after moving past that trauma, I think Bitter Virgin will be the story for you. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10.